LA veterans report for training camp on July 25th at University of California in Irvine as the Rams prepare to earn back-to-back postseason appearances for the first time since 2004. We'll find out if they added and subtracted the right personnel to take that next step, including in-depth roster analysis, as we preview training camp for the LA Rams by going one-on-one with JB Long, voice of the LA Rams, on the OFN Meeting Room with Greg DePalma. All right, it's Wednesday, July 18th, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning into the OFN Meeting Room as we continue to preview NFL training camps for the 2018 season. And our stop today is LA and the voice of the Rams, JB Long. JB, thanks for helping us talk LA Rams football.
Greg, nice to connect with you.
Likewise. So before we get started on talking about the Rams, JB, you've called many pro and college football games over your career. I was interested to know what game stands out among them all for your own, special reasons and why.
Boy, great question. I think the playoff game at the Coliseum last season, the wild card game against the Falcons, even though it didn't go the Rams' direction, was quite an atmosphere, including being a lifelong fan of Snoop Dogg and seeing him perform at halftime. That was a personal highlight.
All right. Was there anything like way back in the annals? Because I know that feeling, when you're first starting out, maybe first few years, could be even arena football. Who knows?
Yeah, sure. I mean, going to Notre Dame and even doing student radio there, I'm sure our audience was all of my parents and aunts and uncles, but nonetheless had the chance to call games at the Big House at Michigan, on the road at Neyland at Tennessee, and then plenty of great home games along the way, even though Notre Dame wasn't particularly good while I was there. So those were thrills. I saw Sean Mannion set the Pac-12's passing record when he was at Oregon State. Luke Falk set the conference's touchdown record, passing Matt Barkley last season. So some fun games along the way, to be certain, but something tells me this 2018 Rams season is going to have a chance to surpass many of those memories.
Yeah, talk about, because everybody wants to know about Aaron Donald, and then all of a sudden Brandon Cooks gets the new deal, the new $80 million deal yesterday. Was that a surprise, and do you think that will impact the negotiations with Aaron Donald?
I wasn't surprised, no. I think the Rams making the move that they did for Brandon was a strong indication that they felt like they had a chance to keep him in Rams colors beyond 2018. His position right now in terms of compensation structure is also better defined than the defensive tackle, elite defensive lineman market is for Aaron Donald. So I think those are some of the dynamics that are at play. There are also exterior forces like what's going on with Khalil Mack, and I'm sure you're well aware of all that. But that being said, I think our hope is that by the time you even get this turned around and posted, maybe the Aaron Donald situation will have resolved itself, and if not, then shortly into training camp, certainly before that early August deadline, and most importantly before they play Week 1 at Oakland.
And then, of course, next year it's LaMarcus Joyner. But these are good problems to have, right? I mean, this is all a part of building a really good roster with a lot of talent. And, I know everybody talks about Sean McVay, and deservedly so, but I'm not sure many people outside of L.A. know how good a general manager and what kind of an impact Les Snead has had on this franchise.
Well, he's done some good work, and I think the biggest stride that the Rams as an organization have made is the dialogue between head coach, who also serves as offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator Wade Phillips, and the front office, clearly communicating with great technology and vision what they hope to have on the field available to them within each position group at each level of the offense and defense, and then giving the front office the opportunity to leverage the tools at their disposal to find great options to address kind of those needs. And last year, before McVay's first season, was very clearly about upgrading an offense, personnel-wise and schematically, that finished last in the league in scoring. Mission accomplished there.
Yep.
It has the feeling, 2018 does, of giving Wade Phillips and his defense a little bit more love and attention, and most importantly, dollars, despite the Cooks transaction, to acquire the likes of Talib and Marcus Peters and Ndamukong Suh to fully evolve his defense to more of the 3-4 style that he's had great success with.
Yeah, a lot, and as I said at the Open, a lot of big personnel moves. Gone, Quinn, Tremaine Johnson, Ogletree, Watkins. Throw in Austin. You bring in Sue, Cooks, as we talked about, Talib and Peters. I mean, these are big names. I mean, this is for a fan base. This is exactly what you want to see. A lot of other organizations might have just been tempted to feel like, oh, okay, we accomplished something. Let's kind of just see how we go next year, make a little move here and there. But the Rams went out and made some, maybe the most impactful moves of any team in the offseason, even though they did have a first or second round draft pick, 11 picks in total. So first of all, who do you think is going to be out of the new faces? Who do you think is going to be the most impactful? And as far as the draft picks, how many do you think will wind up sticking with the roster?
Boy, a lot of good points made there. I'll start with kind of the predicting which newcomer makes the biggest impact, and that's difficult because, really they got Talib and Peters for the price tag roughly of what they lost in Tremaine Johnson, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the Rams went into the offseason figuring that Tremaine leaving was going to leave them with the biggest position of need at corner, which is a prime, highly valued position in professional football, of course, and whether or not they would have to do that in the free agent market or in the draft ultimately proved to be neither. They were able to acquire those pieces via trade. And I think Marcus Peters is a pretty unique talent in the scheme of today's game. And defensively, it's about rush and cover. And the Rams, I think, have a chance to be elite in both respects.
Yeah.
Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh, Michael Brockers wreaking havoc up front, and playing behind them some ball-hawking corners, Talib and Peters, who aren't afraid to jump a route, and once they do come away with an interception, have every intention of finding a way to score. So I think those things go hand in hand. And the forgotten piece is the nickel corner, Nickel Roby-Coleman, who is also playing at a borderline elite level.
Sure.
LaMarcus Joyner at safety, John Johnson at safety coming back for a sophomore season. And then I'm really intrigued to see what Sam Shields might do and what role he might play. Speaking with his position coach, I know they're very excited about the possibilities. He missed a season last year, recovering from some concussion symptoms. But if he is able to play football at top speed again, the Rams may have an embarrassment of riches at that position. All that to come back around to, I think Marcus Peters is the most unique and potentially the longest-lasting talent that they acquired.
Okay.
Talib on a couple years, and Ndamukong Suh on a one-year deal.
That makes sense.
But kind of corresponding to Brandon Cooks on the offensive side, I could see Peters finding a home here in Los Angeles and being a cornerstone piece, no pun intended, for years to come.
What about, because there is some pretty good talent, even though no first, no second-round pick, but 11 picks. I interviewed Brian Allen, and I interviewed him because I like him. He's somebody that you would have to believe, if all goes well, he's the future at center for the Rams maybe in a couple of years. Micah Kaiser, getting a talent like him. Okoronkwo, you get him in the 5th round with Kaiser. Kelly's an interesting running back. So all things considered, not bad to acquire some of the talent that the Rams were able to acquire, considering no first or second round draft picks, especially making sure that those first 2 picks took care of some depth along the offensive line.
Right. Yeah, to start at 89 and come away with the crop they did, I think, is very helpful. And they had the luxury, returning a strong young roster, and given what they did through trades and free agency, to build for the future, I think, through the draft. I mean, there's a scenario where none of the 2018 draft picks or undrafted free agents make much of a dent in the box score this year. And if that's the case, I think it's going to be a positive indicator for the Rams. But kind of just going top to bottom, and we'll start offensive line with Joe Noteboom. There's a chance the Rams could be replacing both tackles next year. Whitworth because of age, Havenstein because of contract. So, ideally, Noteboom grows to the point where he could be a swing tackle on game days this year, maybe see the field, maybe not see the field, but potentially be ready to start in 2019. Likewise for Brian Allen, who I think, John Sullivan got a 2-year contract, but he would be the heir apparent there. And if Sully can play through 2019, so much the better. But if not, I think they are happy to have Allen waiting in the wing.
Yes.
And there's an early season suspension at right guard with Jamon Brown, and I think Brian Allen, if he is on the 53 as an interior backup, may have some opportunity at guard even before he has an opportunity at center. So we'll see there. John Franklin Myers was next in the 4th round, defensive end, not really a position of need, so the Rams must have really liked what they saw there. Micah Kaiser, more so, kind of a thumping middle linebacker. Best case for him, a 5th rounder. He's ready to be the backup interior linebacker, I think. Could be another option in case Corey Littleton, who's slated to start at middle and where the green dot doesn't work out or gets hurt, something like that. Obo Okoronkwo is an interesting name that you mentioned, probably the biggest wild card going into training camp in the season because of his injury that required surgery during OTAs. At outside linebacker, he was, I think, a candidate to get some rookie reps because he's an option at a great position of need.
Yes.
And then I'll stop after John Kelly, and if you're interested in anyone beyond him, feel free to follow up. But with the 6th-round running back, first running back drafted in the short McVay era, and what that does is create a camp battle for RB3, I think, with 2017 college free agent Justin Davis out of USC. Obviously, Gurley, Offensive Player of the Year. Malcolm Brown, a really solid backup. John Kelly put good things in a couple of phases on tape in college. Can he secure that 3rd running back spot is one of the better camp questions to watch, I think.
How long is Okoronkwo out for?
Last I heard, they're expecting him to be ready to compete in training camp.
Okay.
So,
okay.
If there was a silver lining to his injury, it's that it happened early. They attacked it right away, and I imagine he'll be pretty motivated to get back up to speed and to make his impression at UC Irvine, where the Rams train.
Have you seen enough from any of those bottom 5 draft picks that we did not talk about to pick one at all, or is it just way too early, or did somebody stick out?
No, I wouldn't say so. I mean, Justin Lawler got some opportunity because of some missing pieces at outside linebacker or defensive end, basically missing edge pieces or a lack of solidified presences there. So even though he was the last draft pick, maybe the one that we've seen quite a bit of. Jamil Demby, kind of an insurance policy or development project at tackle with the option to maybe bring him down to guard. And working with Aaron Cromer in the Sean McVay system, I just think any offensive lineman is in a fantastic position because quarterback and skill position and scheme is so strong and solidified that offensive line can be about development and learning behind some Pro Bowl caliber players.
You know, I would have said with all these draft picks, especially with the bottom ones, that, hey, you could always use guys to improve your special teams. But, come on, the Rams might have had the best special teams in football. I don't even know if I should say might. I mean, they were the best special teams in football. I mean, with Zerline coming back and having a huge year, 38 of 40, 6 of 7 from 50-plus. Hecker was incredible as a punt returner, and Farrell Cooper pulling off both duties, punt returner, kick returner job, was fantastic. And, of course, he didn't have a great playoff game. But fact is, that had to be the best special teams in football.
Yeah, and they're led by one of the greats, too, in Bones Fossil. And the only curiosity that I have on teams is how do the rule changes with kickoff impact any kind of like 52, 53rd man roster decisions? Based on the way you're playing, you're covering, and you're blocking for kick and kick return, does that dictate maybe an extra player at a position group? Whether it's, sliding away from an extra tight end to another defensive back or a linebacker? Like, what does that look like in terms of the bodies and the structures that you want to create on special teams?
Yeah.
And what opportunity might that create for a bubble guy or take away from someone who has historically been a solid special teams contributor who now they see his role looking a little bit different physically?
All right, let's take a look at the depth chart. And you know what? You went over the secondary, so let's start on defense. And let's start with that secondary. But I'm going to ask you, since you went over the top names, I'll ask you for both positions, what if Joyner or Johnson goes down at safety? Who's the guy that you think would step up? And is there pretty much a big camp battle for that top backup job at safety?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And look, when you're talking about some of the moves the Rams made and some of the paychecks they're handing out, based on the salary cap structure of the NFL, you have to cut a corner somewhere, right?
Yes.
I don't mean literally cut a cornerback. I mean, your roster can't be
yeah.
53 Pro Bowlers.
Sure.
I do think they like what Blake Countess and Marquis Christian have given them at times behind Joyner and behind Johnson. But let's be serious. They are banking on and expecting Joyner and Johnson to play down in and down out.
Yes.
And there aren't many rosters in the National Football League that can take, an elite safety, either because of their accolades or because of their Pro Football Focus grade or whatever, and replace them week to week. So I think the Rams do have some great defensive back flexibility. I don't know that they have a very obvious third safety like they did with Cody Davis last year, for instance.
Okay, and what about corner? So let's say Sam Shields does not have it,
right,
and there's an injury to one of the top three, Talib
right.
Peters, Roby Coleman. Who's the next guy up?
They're in much better shape there. Troy Hill struggled early in the season, shined down the stretch. I mean, he was outrageous in Seattle in the game that preceded the clincher in terms of the division and really sent a statement to the Seahawks in the NFC West.
Okay.
He was one of their stronger contributors, and he is someone that has been mentioned during OTAs as, hey, let's not forget about Troy Hill just because we've added Talib Peters and Shields. Kevin Peterson also had a couple of interceptions against Jimmy Garoppolo in the 49ers in a Week 17 game that did not feature many Rams starters. So he might be another name to keep an eye on in a very deep corner group.
Before we move out to the secondary, how surprising was it that John Johnson did play as well as he did last year?
It surprised me. I remember being quasi-stunned on game day. I think it was the Sunday before the Seahawks game at home at the Coliseum, learning that he would be the starter. Promoted really early in his career and came away with some great plays that day and never relinquished the role. I think that was one of the first indications of Wade Phillips really putting his mark on the defensive changes year to year, was that switch to Johnson, and then also up front taking Brockers to a 5 technique. Probably two of the strokes of Wade Phillips' brilliance that paid off really well last year. I guess I overlooked LaMarcus Joyner playing safety full-time. That's probably another one that I should have started with, but there you have it.
Sure. All right, let's go to linebacker. And so some faces are gone. Alec Ogletree's gone. Connor Barwin, Robert Quinn. So there are some changes. Ramek Wilson comes in. They draft Micah Kaiser. And we also talked about Okoronkwo.
Right.
But not household names when you take a look at the depth chart, as far as guys that could be right now penciled in to get a lot of snaps. So besides Mark Barron, who most people know who he is, who are guys that are better than people think?
And even Barron, given the way that he was not able to finish last season from a health standpoint, having to get a couple of injuries cleaned up this offseason, I mean, my expectation, he did not participate in the offseason program.
Okay.
Didn't play at all last preseason, probably won't play at all again this preseason. They're basically trying to maximize his Sundays at this point. So he's a key piece for them at linebacker, but I'm not sure there are great odds on Barron playing a full 16-game schedule based on his recent history. Going to Corey Littleton as the new middleman in their defense is a great leap of faith, and I know it's one that the Rams are excited about, but here's an underspoken young man, undrafted out of Washington, a great college program and a great defense, calling signals in the NFL and talking to Aaron Donald and Ndamukong Suh and Talib and Peters and all those other great stars. So I think they're putting a lot of trust in him, and I think it has a wonderful chance to succeed. But once again, you have to make some trade-offs when you're paying Ndamukong Suh the type of money that you are.
Sure.
And franchising LaMarcus Joyner at safety and some of the other decisions, you have to find a way in that middle tier of your defense. There's no question about it. So Littleton and Barron up the middle with Bryce Hager, historically a special teams contributor, Ramek Wilson, Micah Kaiser behind them, maybe Traven Howard or Tigre Scales as well.
Okay.
On the edges, Wade Phillips seems pretty confident and pretty set, and Samson Ebukam, the second most heralded player to come out of Eastern Washington in last year's draft class behind Cooper Kupp, both now playing for the Rams, and Matt Longacre on the other side. To repeat on Okoronkwo, again, I think factoring into the Rams' plans before his injury, where do they turn next? Could be Garrett Sickles, Juan Price, Trayvon Young. We'll see is the answer there. And I think if there's any position group to focus on during the preseason and training camp. It's at linebacker.
And Littleton is one of the team's best special teams players, right?
Has been, yeah. I mean, he was very impactful blocking kicks last year, and if you're going to have him in the middle of your defense and on headset, chances are you have to take away some of his special teams obligations.
Yes.
So we'll see who replaces him in that regard. It's a great point.
All right, let's go up front. And so some changes here, of course, as well. And Ndamukong Suh comes in, and hopefully all goes well with Aaron Donald, with Michael Brockers. And there's not going to be a better defensive line in a 3-4 defense in football if that winds up looking the part on opening day. So any impressions yet as far as Ndamukong Suh? Because he does have an interesting personality.
His work ethic is really impressive, just the way he approaches his craft. I think seeing him and Brocker side by side was stunning and impressive in shorts and helmets. To think what it might look like with 99 next to him as well is staggering.
Yeah.
We had the fearsome foursome here in Los Angeles in a previous generation. I'm not sure, the terrorizing trio, something we might have to come up with a name for that group of Donald, Suh, and Brockers. But I'm impressed by and I'm intrigued by some of the names behind them as well, and what that next round of depth looks like.
Okay.
Dom Easley played well in his first year as a Ram. Unfortunately, suffered a training camp injury that cost him all of last year.
Mm-hmm.
For an injury-plagued player, does he have more to offer the Rams? Tanzel Smart got some opportunities early, had his reps taken away late in the season. Might he be able to revamp his young career? And then Ethan Westbrooks kind of returns as a steady piece of that defensive line rotation. So can those three, Westbrook, Smart, Easley, kind of hold on to their roles, or are the Rams ready to turn to the next wave, whether it's Sebastian Joseph Day, John Franklin Myers, their top defensive draft pick, Chunky Clements, Justin Lawler?
Sure.
There are some less heralded names that, not just specific to the Rams, across the NFL, seem to find depth responsibilities and opportunities every training camp, and I would be surprised if there isn't one from that group coming out of the Rams camp this August.
Well, look, fact is, with Wade Phillips running the show, as long as there aren't any major injuries, there is no question this is going to be one of the best defenses in football. And with the way the offense looked last year, that's pretty scary for the rest of the NFL. So there must be well, not some, but it must be a lot of enthusiasm going around the Rams, the fan base, and so forth about what kind of defense they could have. And you mentioned the fearsome foursome, because you can go back to the St. Louis days, and the Rams have, and again, I know there was a lot of non-playoff seasons, and I said that at the Open. It's if you have to look back, 2004 since actually 2003 since their last division title, which they eclipsed with the division title last season. They had not been a 500 team since 2006. So with all of that, though, it's still anything that comes out of St. Louis or the Rams organization as a fan, you think of offense. And of course, Mike Martz, they won the Super Bowls. They won the Super Bowl, been to the Super Bowls. But the defense, we haven't seen that as a branded deal with the Ram franchise in, 30 years?
Yeah, and I think the thing to keep an eye on in 2018 is what their run stuffing looks like, because in Donald, Suh, and Brockers, they have by reputation a front that is elite in that regard. But in terms of results garnered last season, it was the weakness not of the Rams defense, of the entire Rams team. And that's surprising given how often they played from in front, and sometimes significantly in front. You wouldn't expect a team in that position and with those players to give up the totals, and especially the gashing plays that they did in run defense. If they can shore that up, I mean, that Peters and Talib and Nikhil Roby-Coleman and LaMarcus Joyner, they're going to get theirs, and that Aaron Donald is going to get his.
Sure.
Can they put teams in more third down and unmanageable situations? If so, I think they're going to be able to wreak havoc.
All right, let's go to offense, and we'll start at quarterback. Everything's set right with Goff 1, Mannion 2. Do you think that Mannion, from what you've seen from him, do you think there's going to be a team out there at some point that is going to try to bring him on their team to see if he could be a starting quarterback at some point?
No, I think Sean Mannion has a job in this league for many years to come. I don't know that he's perceived as an NFL starter.
Okay.
I'm not sure, and that's not a knock on Sean in any respect.
Sure.
I just don't know what else is out there in terms of him and opportunity. But it's getting to that point in his career where we're going to find out soon enough. And I think from the Rams standpoint, too, it's a fair question to ask going into this training camp and preseason. Is Sean going to finish the month of August as the established number 2 behind Jared Goff? I don't see any reason to think the answer to that question is no, but they do have Brandon Allen, who I know they think highly of, and brought in Luis Perez. So they'll have 4 quarterbacks in camp. And given what Goff was able to put down on film last season and through this offseason program, I would not expect him to play heavily this preseason, especially because if he's going to be in the game, then John Sullivan needs to be in the game, and Andrew Whitworth needs to be in the game,
sure.
and Roger Saffold needs to be in the game, and you just don't want to put too many reps on those guys.
Perez is the kid that intrigues me. I mean, he's not. I don't see him making the roster, but as a practice squad guy. Yeah, as a practice squad guy, though, considering the small school and so forth, he looks the part. So he could be a very intriguing long-term prospect.
He is an amazing bowler as well. He's the ringer when they go to the bowling alley. So that's part of
that helps.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's go to running back. We've already kind of talked about that, though. So the major battle is going to be for that number 3 job, right?
I think so. I mean, there's a chance that maybe Malcolm Brown gets surpassed as the number 2 back. I'm not sure, to be honest, what Justin Davis has done to improve his standing since he flashed but also fumbled last preseason. I imagine John Kelly, given the draft capital that the Rams utilized this spring to acquire his services, will be given every opportunity to win a job in that backfield.
All right, let's go to the receivers. And, again, Watkins is gone, but I think the Rams are happy with that trade-off because Cooks is in. And with Kupp and Woods, it's going to be a heck of a trio. Really, Woods kind of surprised me a little bit how well he played. But it kind of shows you the difference when you get the type of quarterback play that Woods wasn't used to at Buffalo and how that can change the perception of a receiver. And that's exactly what we saw with Robert Woods last year.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because I think some naysayers would say of the Rams they don't have a single true number 1. And I would argue the Rams have 3 number 1s in terms of if you had to decide right now who's going to lead the Rams in receptions, receiving yards, and receiving touchdowns. I think those are very tough calls because Cooper Kupp is one of the most reliable targets in the rookie class. Jared Goff, he and Jared Goff have an amazing rapport. Robert Woods played like a number 1. He may not be compensated like a number 1, but he was the number 1 receiver on the best offense in the NFL last year. I don't think that can be overlooked. And Brandon Cooks obviously just got paid number 1 money and has put up seasons that are deserving of that mantle as well. So I think with all 3 of those players being under contract for the next 3 seasons, I think Goff, McVay, and the Rams have the opportunity to do a ton of damage to the passing game. What'll be intriguing to me is who can replace Sammy Watkins on the goal line.
Okay.
Sammy did not have his most prolific season, maybe did not live up to some people's expectations after the Rams traded for him. However, he had 8 touchdowns.
Yes.
The Rams got inside the 5. He was their best option in the passing game. Do those targets go to Josh Reynolds, a bigger body coming back for a second season who has put some good things on tape? Or do we see more from a lackluster tight end group? And is that the area in which McVay's offense grows and evolves most from year 1 to year 2?
Has Steven Mitchell, is that a player to keep an eye on long-term, practice squad candidate?
I think the Rams are pretty set in their receiving group.
Okay.
The top 3 plus Reynolds. Pharaoh Cooper is there, of course, as a good candidate and because of what he does on special teams.
Yep.
And if Mitchell or Fred Brown or any other receiver is to earn the 5th or the 6th place, they're going to have to unseat Mike Thomas, who's also a special teams favorite and has put some good things in front of the coaching staff as well.
And the tight end situation, I actually thought that at some point in the draft, that they, with especially all the draft picks and a deep tight end class, that the Rams would have went after a tight end. They didn't. Now, they like Everett. They used a second-round draft pick. Might have been a little bit high. Most people thought that was. He hasn't developed yet, but he's young. So how does that look right now with Everett and Higbee? And it also looks like there might be some depth issues as well behind those 2.
So we'll start with Gerald Everett, and I think you're right to point out the fact that when you're drafted in that position, you probably expect bigger numbers in year one. However, we also kind of lean on the saying that tight end might be the toughest position to come into the NFL and contribute at because of the dual role of competing in the run and the pass game. Maybe all the more so for Gerald Everett, who's a converted basketball player, small school, lots of transfers, lots of different systems. You know, the consistency of being with McVay through a full offseason, I think, has the opportunity to put him in a position where he could be the Rams' most improved player.
Okay.
And they need him to be.
Yeah.
Because between Everett and Higbee and Hemingway, who missed all of last season with an injury, the Rams have to get more production from that position. Whether or not it's targets, catches, touchdowns, it has to be competing in the running game, setting an edge, all those sorts of things. But the competing dynamic there that I think is intriguing for the Rams offensively is they have that receiving trio that we mentioned, and they're in 11 personnel as much or more than any team in the league.
Yeah, that's true.
So to get tight ends on the field consistently and to get multiple tight ends on the field consistently, who are you going to take off?
Yeah. And then throw in the fact that you have one of the top running backs in football who gets a lot of carries and touches overall. So
are you going to go empty and take Todd Gurley off the field, or are you going to remove Kupp, Woods, or Cooks from a bunch set and replace him with Gerald Everett or Tyler? I mean, maybe. I think it's certainly at McVay's disposal to create mismatches in that regard. But based on their tendencies last year, yes, they need more from their tight end position, but how that's going to happen remains to be seen.
Who's the best blocker, or who has the best attributes to be the best blocker?
Well, Higbee, but he's also the only man in that group who's played 2 full NFL seasons.
Yes.
Everett is entering his, and Hemingway missed his would-be second season last year, so we don't know. And whether or not Johnny Muntz, who kind of came on late and scored a touchdown in the 4th preseason game at Green Bay last year, gives the threat that they're wanting to deploy, or Henry, Craig, or Coble. I don't know. I mean, I think that's a position where you might see a surprise if the Rams find the right individual.
All right, and then let's close up with the offensive line. And I got to believe that this is the one unit on the Rams that improved the most and really surprised. Of course, Goff had a big awakening, but fact is, he doesn't have that awakening as easily if the offensive line doesn't do their job. Very smart, of course, to bring in Whitworth and John Sullivan, wily veterans who, like you said, may only be around for another year or two, but it was important for a young quarterback to have the stability on the offensive line, and that's what those two guys did. And then you throw in, Havenstein and Saffold had a nice season last season. I think he gets lost in the shuffle. And this was actually one of the better, more underrated offensive lines in football.
It sure was, and also durable. I mean, the Rams have had some tremendous luck in the injury report the last 2 seasons since moving to L.A., and especially last year. That group, you take out Week 17 when they had already clinched, they started every meaningful game for the Rams last year. And already going into this season, we know that won't be the case because Jamon Brown won't be available for the first couple of weeks. So, yes, there's another year of age for John Sullivan and Andrew Whitworth, and Jamon Brown suspended. Are they going to be able to feel that much consistency again in 2018? The odds are stacked against them, but I wouldn't put it past them, and especially Aaron Cromer, who their position coach, I think, did an unheralded job last year. To change schemes and to come in and repair what was a damaged unit with 2 new pieces was truly fascinating to behold, and kudos to him, and the Rams certainly hoping for more of the same this fall.
Who starts at right guard on opening day?
It's a great question. I mean, I think probably Austin Blythe by default, just because we saw him fill in for John Sullivan a couple of times at center mid-game last season. I think that would be a decent bet. But maybe it's Jake Eldrenkamp, or maybe it's Brian Allen. Like I said, I think the good news for the Rams is they know about it now, right? And so they have the entire preseason to tinker and to see, do we just need to plug a hole for 2 weeks, and who might be the best option to do that and let the other pieces stay in their place, or are we going to open this thing up and give some of those players the opportunity to compete for that job full time, depending on what they do against Oakland and the home opener and go from there.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because that is the one question mark on the line anyway, is that right guard spot. So if there's now that opportunity is open for somebody to go in there and press, and maybe Brown regrets the suspension and doesn't get his job back. It's possible.
Yeah, I mean, he's a wonderful person. I've really enjoyed my interactions with him, and I know he feels badly about what transpired and is committed to making amends for it. And if, he's kind of that week 3 injection, so be it. But in the meantime, I think it creates competition for training camp, which should only be beneficial. And this time last year, we weren't even sure if Havenstein and Brown were going to play guard and tackle or tackle and guard respectively. So at least in terms of year-to-year progression, I think the Rams are much more sorted out in terms of what they hope to do on the offensive line, just a matter of personnel at this point.
All right, great job, JB. I really appreciate educating me and the listeners for the Rams as they get ready for training camp next week. It should be an exciting season, injuries permitted, and that's the one thing that we have to make sure that they're. I tell you what, it's a great part about the NFL is the fact that there is so much parity, and from year to year, a lot of the reasons why teams can make falls or climbs depends on which teams deal with less injuries. And so we know that the Rams are stacked right now, and if they can just stay healthy, it should be a fantastic year. And I'm sure it's going to be, as you said in the open of the show, a very fun year to cover them.
It's always the biggest if, and it was a good tune-up for me, a good exercise for me. Now, if we show up at training camp and they've got Ndamukong Suh playing nickel and Jared Goff playing tight end, I'll come back and offer my mea culpa.
I'm glad that you at least threw that out there just in case. I'm sure that won't happen, but we at least look forward to talking to you again, even if it doesn't happen at some point during the season, JB.
Anytime. Nice to be in touch.
Likewise. Thanks, JB. That's JB Long joining us here, talking Rams football, the voice of the Rams on the OFN meeting room. So I tell you, the Rams, I haven't even looked at Super Bowl futures yet. I'm not at that point. See, I know you get people making predictions on TV. They make predictions like a month ago. I don't make predictions on stuff. I mean, Tony Romo's predicting Super Bowl champions, and we're not even at the training camp yet. Come on. Just wait it out, wait through training camp, a little bit of preseason. Injuries, as I said, mean an awful lot. And you just got to have also a little bit of a feel for what's going on from year to year. Just look at the Rams compared for what happened last year to this year. Incredible. I mean, come on. You just have to be patient. We're still at least another month or two away before we figure this stuff out. But things awfully look good for the Rams right now. There ain't no question about that. They got a taste last year. They're a young team. Maybe this is their year to get back to the Super Bowl. It could happen. All right, but we'll talk more about that aspect of the NFL season in a few weeks because we still have to get through the rest of our training camp previews. Arizona, Atlanta. We have Buffalo, by the way, on Friday. We still got to get to Carolina and the Chargers. And we have our Jets preview on the 23rd. That's Monday. Of course, we have our Jet podcast, and our new analyst this year is Randy Lang from NewYorkJets.com. So great to have him on board covering the New York Jets this year on Jets Uncovered. But first, we'll talk Philadelphia Eagles football tomorrow, and that's at 7 Eastern right here on the OFN meeting room. Make sure to order your NFL draft review guide at ourlads.com. And thanks for listening to this edition of the OFN Meeting Room with Greg DePalma on the Ourlads Football Radio Network, where it's never too early to think about the start of the 2018 football season.